I prepared a few slides that I'll go over with a little narrative in preparation for discussions that we might have next week. So you can take a look at this at your leisure. So this is the preparation of looking at applying molding systems to common BIM building information modeling components. This is my first experiment with looking at what would happen in an interior with some of custom moldings attached to door, window, floor, and ceiling elements. And a lot of what you see here, the application of these lights, the idea here is to bring up the details and the shapes by creating shadow detail. And I think it's important to kind of keep this in mind as we go forward, because how well people respond to wanting to use moldings and work with them in their projects and work with them in their drawings are how well they're going to look in the scenes that they develop to present to their clients and to the people that they work with. So in this case, this is a out-of-the-box Revit rendering. This is not ray traced. There are no reflections in the windows. And it does Revit right now does a very respectable job of being able to relatively accurately portray these kind of details in attractive ways without time-consuming modeling. And I'm back to that idea of it needs to be efficient for the architect or designer to want to stick with these kind of detail elements on interiors or in buildings, and not I guess maybe jump back to other features that they might want to add to the room. So if these things start to look good and important out of the box, they're probably more willing to carry these forward. So a lot of what we talk about is both technical and marketing oriented, I think. So this was the first molding I created. This is the way the modeling environments typically work is you have the idea of a profile. This is a 2D drawing. This is done inside of Revit as a family element. I highlighted that you can actually import it in CAD. I didn't realize when I was first starting that you actually had DWG files available on your website already. So in a later example, I use another example for the door casing. But this is just a freehand molding that I use so I could experiment with applying it to the window element. In this case, we're looking at 3 drawings. The first one is actually the building model itself that you just saw at the, with the 3 windows or 4 windows in it. And it's just me cutting a section through it to kind of expose the molding details. But the second one over is the actual BIM component. That is the raw window element before it gets placed into a wall. And it's important to notice that's parametric. It is understood that when that window is placed onto a surface, that it opens the surface up and inserts the window. And then it has an interior side, an exterior side, and a host of details in it. And those are very useful when you start to cut through the model later on to create technical documentation, which is what the third slide is. And that is, what does it look like when we're cutting through the window in a wall? And this is where we would expose or detail ideas about clips. So it's very likely that you can create a relatively sophisticated BIM window element that can be used very effectively in the detailing component of creating documentation. Once again, really important, if architects can see the easy workflow of incorporating moldings into their architectural projects. So there's a little more explanation of that idea of doing profiles. So inside of Revit, whenever you want to extrude a surface out along it, you start with a profile. Revit has a whole host of different kinds of profiles for whatever technical applications, but there's a generic profile element that's used for actually a majority of the things that we're going to discuss. And I'm showing how I've opened one of those in that family environment. I've imported the DWG file that was available from your website, and I then took it and rotated it and cleaned it up so that it would be available as a clean profile. I want to take note here that I could not just use this profile without doing some modification to it. So that's important going forward. I think it will be valuable for you to create Revit profiles of all of your DWG files for your customer to avoid some problems that might actually just frustrate them, take a lot of time, and or make them give up. So in this case, what happened was you'd explode this element, delete all the things you didn't want, and rotate it over. But what it wouldn't do was it wouldn't complete this form when it was imported as a profile. I had to go back and make some minor modifications to some of these shapes in here in order for Revit to see it as a completed structure or a completed form. So good reason to think about creating these for the customer. So here's the same thing as a door element. Once again, a BIM door with the molding applied to it, and it's not shown in its context. This is the BIM family element of the door in a wall. This wall is just used for reference because we really haven't, this is not in the model yet. It is outside of the model. But anyway, the easy application by just substituting out this door. It's very likely we could create this kind of a nature of a 4-panel door like this with every Dahlstrom door casing pre-attached to it, so as to simplify the customer's selection of profiles. So they would have a drop down over here which would give the whole list of profiles that were available. By selecting one of those, it would activate that specific profile for the door. And they could do that either in the BIM side of it or the family element, or once it was placed into the document. And this is just a section cut through it, looking down on it. But the importance of being able to, this is the BIM model, and cutting and then exposing all of the details that would be important for documentation. In this case, it's pointing out, you can see where the molding is right flush with the casing. This would typically be set back. We would probably want to bring in an alternate or a clip detail and set that on that drawing, you know, with some screw heads already placed into it. So the detailer could quickly complete the documentation for the application of moldings. This just kind of points out for people who are not familiar with parametric modeling, this is the same door, except that the door has been duplicated and resized. And this still illustrates the power of parametric concepts, especially in architectural applications, where here we made a door, we've taken a 3-foot by 8-foot door and made it to, I think, a 4-foot by 10-foot door. But you'll notice that the doorknob stays at the same height. So the doorknob is parametrically linked to the ground plane to have a certain fixed distance to it. So no matter what the change of the height of the door, it will always have the doorknob at the right location. And likewise with the width of the panels, the board that would sit between the panels would always stay the same so that it's accurately scaled up without having to reconstruct building elements. And we should keep that in mind when we build BIM components, that they behave the same way. Floor baseboard and cove molding, ceiling cove moldings are a different animal. They actually are placed into the model itself. This is the representation model that I built up. And these are placed as what are called wall sweeps. This would also happen with a chair rail, chair molding that would go along the center, you know, I don't know what it is, 32 inches high or whatever the specification is for chair rail. In this case, I just quickly put these in. They're very difficult to render in a way that is significant as far as how it reads in the drawing or in the rendering of the model, because it doesn't play a lot of shadows here. So I've actually had to turn the lines on to make them exposed. They would almost disappear without the lines. This is something we need to think about and work with and maybe communicate to the customer through video support about how to get these to read better. So that would be something going forward to spend some time considering. So this is just prior to summing it up, the idea is just a video support piece of training material. Besides the idea of having profiles and a few custom window and door elements, you would want to have instructional videos how the client can both advantage themselves to creating beautiful interior renderings with the moldings, how to take their own custom windows that they may get from another manufacturer and apply Dahlstrom trims using our already available family of profiles. And I'll just quickly sum up the kind of recommendations that would follow with all those slides. All the DWGs that you have could be converted to Revit profiles and provided on the web directly associated with the profile itself. That should be in every location. It should be very clear to anyone who visits the site that these profiles are available. They shouldn't have to dig for them. There really shouldn't be a secret. Example door and window, and that's a place where they would find that to be useful and engaging, so to speak, if they could find a unique shape and then have it readily available without having to do any work with it. At a minimum, an example door and window should be created with all the profiles attached to it into the BIM component, which allows somebody to place it and then select different window casings and door treatments and actually see those take place within the model without having to go through a tedious importing of other profiles. So it would just be a drop down of whatever molding they wanted. It would instantly appear. And then to support all of that activity, at least 2 types of instructional videos. One about just in general making wall sweeps of Dahlstrom moldings, wall sweeps for, and sweeps in general, sweeps around the BIM window and door component, and window sweeps or wall sweeps along actual walls. And to support that, the idea of making custom sweeps on BIM models or BIM windows and doors that they would import from other manufacturers. And then all of these videos being available on the web and on YouTube for extra exposure. And probably a lot of people might just track their way back to the site just to figure out how to do these kind of activities with inside of Revit. So I hope that's a good starting overview, and look forward to having some discussions about it.